Hello, hello, this is Rachel. I have hamsters, and today is an extra special episode because I got Tony from Snow White's Rescue Cottage to join me on the podcast and talk to me about her rescue work and her new seed mix and the movie that she's been a part of. She is like so prolific in the hamster world and so knowledgeable. It was so wonderful chatting with her. So I hope you enjoy today's conversation as much as I did. We are on. Okay, so maybe I will do a little introduction for you, the best I know, and you can kind of fill in the facts. But so I have Tony with me, and she's from Snow White Rescue Cottage. But I also feel like I know a bit about Tony, that I've seen your name on the CHA, California Hamster Association, and as a moderator in various Facebook groups and on research papers that you've published through the CHA. So I feel like you're kind of like everywhere in the hamster world. And I'm pretty sure you used to breed as well. So I just felt like you would be such a fun guest to have and like answer so many questions for me. It's a little bit selfish, but also hopefully other people.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. I do almost everything with hamsters. I've really put my name out there in the community the best that I can, because I love to help people. And it, as you know, can be a very daunting task once you have a hamster and you realize, oh no, maybe I'm doing everything wrong.
Yes. And I feel like that's exactly how I got into it, is you get a hamster and then you're like, oh no, turns out I don't know anything about hamsters.
Yeah. My expertise is more base level. So like people who are maybe upgrading from a critter trail, or just like maybe we just need to start by informing them that they need to upgrade.
Right.
And I have so much respect for the work that you are doing with, okay, now you are committed and you are ready to provide a very high quality life. Let's do that. So you are like steps past me, which I love. We need that too.
Oh, you're so sweet. Oh, thank you. I do not feel that way. I mean, I am so amazed when you show photos of all the hamsters you take care of. And yeah, I mean, how you do it. I only have 7 hamsters right now, but I keep thinking like, I don't think I could do any more. Is it a lot? It's a fair amount. I think that probably I could do more, but I think I wouldn't be able to like invest emotionally in them in the same way. I think it's sort of like, that's the line for me. Yeah.
And that's the difference. I mean, I'm able to take care of the ones that I do because it's a different standard of care. Like I'm keeping everybody alive,
right,
to the best of my abilities. And it's like, that is an upgrade from usually where they started as a rescue, you know?
Yeah.
But you are providing the like in-depth, high quality, like very enriched level of care, which does take a lot of emotional and financial toll for sure.
Yes. Yeah, both of those things. Although I think with hamsters, it's like once you get the hang of it, like the financial part, other than vet care, it's not like, you're like, oh, the vet care. Yeah. But outside of that, it's like a lot of it you can do DIY, or like a lot of it is sort of like once you invest in the good stuff, it kind of can last, for many hamsters. So it's sort of like initial upfront. I mean, right. Yeah. And it's still like a way more like practical pet to me than like a dog, or even a cat, like from a financial or like lifestyle standpoint.
Sure.
Yeah. Cause I can like give them care, but I can go away for a day. They're going to be fine. Like I don't have to, I mean, I have one hamster
who's self-sufficient that way.
Yes. I mean, I have one hamster who constantly begs to come out, but I know he'll survive a day if I'm not here, even though I feel bad.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me more about like, how did you get started? Because it feels like you've done and you like, whenever I've asked you a question, you always know this like extremely in-depth answer. So you must have like a very long and rich history. And I'm curious how it began.
Yes. I think I'm coming up on at least 15 years
Wow.
in the hamster space. And there's been a lot of wonderful change since then. I'm so proud of everybody in the community, newcomers alike. I started when I was about 15, and
Okay.
don't tell anyone, but I'm turning 30 next week. And I wanted to get a hamster, but I had an inkling about Petco, even though at that time we didn't like know for sure what was going on behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found this wonderful hamster breeder. Her name is Linda Price. She was AAA Hamsters in Lake Forest, California.
Oh,
yeah, and I went. My dad drove me like 2.5 hours to her house to go pick up my little hamster, which was a Syrian hamster at the time.
mm-hmm.
And I fell in love with her. And this lady is like, we do hamster shows. You should come to one. And I was like, okay. So once I started going, I was hooked. And again, thank you to my parents who drove me to every hamster show before I had my license. And I just grew in that community. So when Linda retired, she handed things down to me. And at the time, my partner, Aaron Ramsey, who is Cheeks and Squeaks Hamsters.
Oh,
so you mentioned that I used to breed. Yes, I used to breed with Aaron as Cheeks and Squeaks. And that was an awesome time. And then it was right around, I think we were in COVID maybe. 4 years. So it would be 2020 was when I really recognized the dwarf hamster overpopulation crisis in Southern California. And I pivoted to rescue.
Wow.
So that's how I got started. And then we've been doing California Hamster Association along the way. We have our annual show, which I used to judge, but now I'm like, running my little rescue booth. And we've been trying slowly to change the standard of care for hamsters, which has been met with challenge in some ways as well.
Yeah, I bet. I'm curious. I have like so many questions based on what you just said, but are there still hamster like breeding shows in the United States? I don't think I've heard of them.
We, to my knowledge, currently host the only shows in North America.
Okay.
We used to have 4 annual shows. They're a much smaller affair, but we used to get good, like really high quality breeders. I would say up until like the mid to late 2010s. And those people have just slowly retired over the years or moved on to different things.
Oh, how interesting. So, do you think it's like an economic thing or just like it just kind of happened, like no particular reason?
I think that unfortunately hamsters can be a fleeting pet or a fleeting interest for a lot of people. I mean, we kind of think of them as children's pets, even though you and I might know better.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of people that got into it with their kids. And then when their kids got, grown up, they just kind of stopped doing it. But it's a shame. We lost a lot of beautiful genes that way. For example, Nicole Royer, who ran Taro Hamsters, she had the only healthy dark gray Syrians in, I guess to my knowledge, the world. I believe, my memory might fail me, but that gene is linked to neurological abnormalities. Oh. And hers didn't. And so when she retired, we lost that. And like I said, I believe it's extinct now, actually.
Wow, that's wild. I think I looked this up at some point. I was looking for a Roborovsky breeder, and I think there was also a Robo breeder somewhere in like the SoCal area.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if
Moxie.
Maybe, yeah. And I think I like looked at her Facebook page, and at some point she was like, "Okay, I'm going to retire. Does anyone want to take my stock?" And yes. I don't know what happened. Yeah, but I was like, "Oh, what a bummer. There's really no Robo breeders." And even now, I mean, there's like one dwarf breeder.
Right. Who's fantastic.
Yes. Yeah. She seems super great. I've only heard good things about her. Actually, I'm wearing her sweatshirt right now. The Easily Distracted by. I love this sweatshirt. I was like, cute. Oh, maybe she should sell stuff at the fair. Yeah, but what was I going to say? Oh yeah. So then you pivoted into the rescuing, and it's true. I think this is a thing I didn't know about. Like LA has like a crazy dwarf hamster problem. I don't know why. I don't understand what it is. But I wish I had known before I bought one Robo from Petco, but I rescued the others, but I had no idea like how crazy it is and how many I don't know like the data, but it seems like a lot of them don't really get out of the shelters. And then thankfully, like, you, and then there's Hamster Rescue and maybe a few other places that seem to help out. But I mean, before that, like there was nothing really.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The reason that we know of is mom and pop pet shops, which are awesome. I love having alternatives to the big box stores. They sell hamsters mixed. And there's the pervasive belief that dwarf hamsters have to have company. So they're either housed together at the store, and even if someone buys one, inevitably it's a pregnant female. Or they come home with two, and best case is it's a male and a female, and there's only one pregnancy. I mean, I guess you could get lucky with boys now that I think about it, but
yeah.
And so they are notoriously difficult to sex. As you probably see in the hamster groups, there's 10 posts every day. What sex is this hamster? And they're prolific breeders. They breed even faster than rabbits. Their gestation period is 21 days, and they can get pregnant at 4 weeks and have a new litter every 3 weeks. So if you do the math there, you're close to 2 million hamsters from just a breeding pair within 2 years.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's amazing that there aren't them. I mean, I'm sure thanks to basically you and a couple other rescues, like that's the reason why there aren't 2 million hamsters.
Right. We try.
Yeah. Wow. That is crazy. So did you have was this like a specific, when you pivoted into rescuing, was it like a decision that you made? Or I think maybe I read on your website, there was a specific crazy, there was someone with 100 hamsters, kind of a situation like what you just described. They bought 2 hamsters and suddenly had 100.
Right.
And then you stepped in and took them. Is that kind of how you got started?
Yeah, pretty much. My friend at the time, she had talked to some breeder on Craigslist. And before I knew it, we had somehow convinced this guy who was charging he wanted to charge us a couple $100s to just give us all his hamsters. So we went, we picked him up that day. And when final count was close to 70 hamsters. And so I'm like, great, we're running a rescue now. As you put your name out there, you get a lot of support, but you also get people finding you to give you their hamsters. So I think the case you're referring to was I was contacted by a social worker who was working with an elderly client and her daughter who were in poor health, and they were at risk of eviction because they had just so many hamsters. And I go there in the heart of LA. It's the house, it reeked of cigarettes. They're chain smoking, and all in there, sex and hamsters. They've got hamsters in every kind of container, big storage bins with just dozens of dwarf hamsters, and bird cages and flower pots and pots and pans and all kinds of things. Oh my God. Yeah. And then hamsters running loose because they're constantly escaping.
Oh my God. That's crazy. Wow. Yeah.
So I came in with supplies and got everybody separated, males and females. I took all the potential pregnancies. I took all males, and I left them with just confidently non-pregnant females. So then I was at my final numbers of 200, which was a blessing and a curse because now I have 200 hamsters. But the blessing was I had to build capacity to be able to take care of all of them. And so now those are my numbers that I can take care of as a rescue.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So
which makes us, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was just going to say so impressive.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I was just going to say that actually makes us the largest hamster specific rescue in North America.
Wow. That is cool. That is so great. Yeah. I mean, I suppose a lot of I think when I think about a lot of the rescues, it starts off as a person with a few and then it becomes a few more. But yeah, I don't think I've seen someone scale to the way you have, when you show photos and the, the sheer numbers. Is impressive is the best word for it. How did you know that those females that you left them with were not pregnant? How could you say that?
They were babies. I can tell by size that they were just too young. And then I did take a couple trips just to make sure. So I wasn't just good luck.
No, I was just thinking that's very impressive knowledge that you could just tell this is a pregnant hamster. This is not. Yeah. Wow. I had made a little list of stuff to talk to you about. So, we kind of jumped right to rescuing and it. And so since we're here, what do you think what do you think like the hardest parts are? And then I'm kind of also like, maybe you can balance that with like, it's sometimes, so I'm in this work group and we always talk about like rose and thorn, like what's your rose and thorn this week? Like, do you have kind of a rose and thorn for rescuing? And maybe the second follow-up question to that is like, is it what you thought it would be, or is it something else, you know?
Oh, those are great. Yeah, it's funny. My real job is I'm a children's therapist. So I use rose and thorn all the time. I love that.
Oh, yeah.
I think that the best and the worst part is the two-sided coin of the people. I see so many careless people that view these animals as commodities or assets. They seek to make money off of them. And when they can't, they dump them on us. Yeah. And so that's really disheartening. But on the flip side, when I do pet retention, which is like my bread and butter, I love that work. I see so much more caring than I ever thought I would. You know, for example, that family that had all of those hamsters all over the place, like we cried together when I like took their hamsters. Like they were really doing the best they could with the limitations that they had to provide the best possible care. And it wasn't a good situation for the animals. Like I'll never excuse that, but like it was born of just trying to do their best, which I can definitely have respect for.
Yeah. Oh, that's so sweet. And I think there's something really powerful. And maybe as a therapist, this is something, I don't know, you can speak to more, but like, I feel like there's something so powerful for helping people have a connection with their hamster or any pet. But if they have a hamster, helping them foster that connection. Cause just I've felt it. Like, you know, I sort of got a hamster on a whim, and then I had no idea how strong that connection could be once I like invested the time and effort into like fostering it, and how much of a difference in my life that could make, you know, how like happy it made me to like come home to a little furry creature who was, you know, sometimes happy to see me too, you know, hamsters, but like, yeah. And I think I would imagine that could be very rewarding and rewarding like for you and rewarding for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they definitely have their own little personalities and quirks. And if you spend enough time, even if you have as many as I do, like you really come to know those animals and appreciate them on an individual level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so sweet. Yeah. Yeah, me too. Yeah. So, and then I guess my question, okay, before I jump onto other topics, I'm curious if when you started rescuing, did you think it would be as hard as it is? Is it easier than you thought? I mean, I don't think anything about rescuing is easy. So, but I wonder if there's any like surprises. Have you had any sort of like, oh, like this is something I wasn't expecting?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is like you think of rescue, you think like I'm going to go and I'm going to save these animals and I'm going to adopt them out, like the cycle,
Right.
which that is true. That's a big part of it. But I think the pet retention was really what surprised me. It was born of necessity of like I can't take in as many animals as like need help, and so I need to find a way for these animals to receive better care, to stop having babies, and to help the people that are just completely overwhelmed. And so by being able to reduce that stress on them by taking the high risk situations of medical and pregnancies and providing them with safe and secure caging that isn't perfect, but is a certain step up from what they had, and makes their life easier by, you know, in terms of cleaning and keeping them healthy and contained for one.
Yeah.
And then also providing them with supplies to reduce the financial burden, like giant bags of food and large bags of bedding, and continuing to provide that ongoing care to enable them by just realistically saying, listen, sadly, these animals are short-lived, and let's just set you up to take care of them for the next 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. That's actually, when you say it, I was thinking like, I think one of my questions I had like been thinking in my head is like, what's the solution to the problem in LA? And I feel like that is a great solution actually, is enabling those people to have the better care. And that's really innovative. Like, I don't know how you came up with that, but yeah, that's awesome. And I'm sure that, yeah.
shout out to my local shelter, which is a county shelter, but they actually run completely no-kill, obviously, except for behavioral and illness situations.
Sure.
They have a very robust pet retention program for dogs and cats, and there just was something missing for the small animals. And so I really modeled it based on them. So thanks to
very cool
BCAS over there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so great. Okay, well, I also, and this is like how this all got started for me at least, is I reached out to you because I knew that you knew things about Oxbow. And
yes.
and it started, well, actually it's been this like thing that's been ongoing in my life. Even, every time I take a hamster to the vet, they always recommend Oxbow. Like when they tell me like, oh, buy critical care, they'll say like, buy the herbivore one. And I'll say, aren't hamsters omnivores? And they're like, oh, it's fine. and then the same, like, many vets do recommend Oxbow pellets. And this came up for me recently. I mean, I sort of like just learned to ignore it, but I was at a PetSmart maybe, and I saw them feeding Oxbow pellets to all the hamsters. And I just was like, oh, that's so sad that their feed is like so boring, that it's like literally just these like only pellets. There's like no variation or anything. But that also my understanding is that it was not good for them. And when I asked the staff there, they said like, oh, well, this is what our vet recommends. And I reached out to the vet and they're like, yeah, that's the best one for hamsters. And so then I reached out to you and I was like, that can't be true. So maybe you can tell me, I know you told me, but I'm curious, for the audience, like why is Oxbow bad? And also, and specifically, why is hay, like what is problematic about hay for hamsters? And then, I still don't know why vets recommend it. And I don't know if you know why, but a mystery.
Well, so fantastic questions. I'm going to start by saying I am not a nutritionist. I'm not a veterinarian. I'm just a girl who reads research papers about hamsters.
Right.
I try. And the story with Oxbow began actually with California Hamster Association, and this was years ago. They've changed the formulation. I'm definitely not saying that this is an imminent risk, but probably 20 years ago they approached us and said, hey, would you offer our food, which was a new diet at the time, as like prizes at your events? Like, would you test it with your breeding animals? If we provide the supply. And a number of breeders took them up on that, and they started providing it at the shows and things like that. And they noticed a lot of their animals started dying.
Oh, wow.
I think it was Linda Price who did the necropsies on her animals, and they found that it was nutritional deficit. So she reached out to the lead vet at Oxbow at the time, and they said that they had performed their testing for taste, but not for longevity.
Oh,
right. And once again, the formulation has changed. Animals are obviously able to sustain life on Oxbow, so I'm not saying there's imminent risk of death.
Right.
But that's the backstory in our organization and why that became very pervasive in the hamster community, that we just don't feed Oxbow.
Oh, okay. That's great background to know.
Yeah. So to answer about the vet's recommendations, Oxbow makes wonderful food for most other species of animals, to my knowledge. Like their rat food is recommended in the rat communities. Their hay is obviously extremely popular and recommended in the guinea pig and rabbit circles.
Right.
And so it's just that they missed the mark with their hamster diet, at least in my opinion. It is Timothy hay based, which, as you know, is much more appropriate for herbivores and ruminants. Hamsters are partial ruminants. They have a two-chambered stomach, which is similar to, sheep and cows and animals that eat grasses. Yeah, because they would naturally eat grasses in the wild. So there's also this myth that got purported that hamsters cannot digest hay and therefore they can't have Oxbow.
Right.
They can digest hay just fine in their special little tummies. The issue is that hamsters are more protein quality dependent than ruminants. So what that means is, consider like you're trying to get 30 grams of protein, for example, and you have the option of having a protein shake or eating 30 grams of protein in oatmeal. Well, it'd be pretty difficult and at least certainly much more material to eat that much protein in oatmeal versus like 2 scoops of protein powder.
Right.
That's protein quality, because when you're consuming that oatmeal, for example, you're also consuming a large amount of fiber and other vitamins and minerals and a lot more bulk. And if you shrink that down to a tiny little hamster tummy, they have to consume a lot more of that diet in order to get the same amount of nutrients that they could get from another diet.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. And and so is there any, sometimes people say something, I guess, to maybe people who don't know much about like bunnies or guinea pigs, but like bunnies and guinea pigs like need hay, or their digestive tract might stop, right? But with hamsters, there isn't a fear of that, or there's not as much worry about fiber intake.
Correct. Yeah, there's fiber in the other items that they're consuming, in the grains, seeds, legumes. That's one of the reasons a seed mix is really nice as well. They get enough fiber from the other parts that they're consuming, and that's really species appropriate fiber, because while they would be munching on some wild grasses, more likely they're going and finding little treasures and insects and all kinds of things if they're in the wild.
Right. Yeah, that was kind of my understanding of how they eat in the wild, is like less graphs and more like specific, bugs, seeds, like kind of more, like the little nutritional nuggets rather than like a cow grazing in grass.
Right.
Which, a very different thing. So along those lines, would you say, and I didn't ask you this one before, so this is, I don't know if you have an answer, but like critical care herbivore versus omnivore, it's really hard to find omnivore. Is herbivore version an appropriate sub-in? I haven't actually looked at the nutritional like breakdown, but I do know that it has Timothy hay, and I'm pretty sure it's like a Timothy hay based nutrition. Yeah. Yeah.
I would say if your vet is recommending it to you, it is okay. The whole point of the critical care diet is it's an emergency diet. Just like, if you're sick, like you're going to eat like your chicken soup, or you're going to drink Gatorade when you might not typically do so. You just need to get calories in the body and electrolytes and everything to give yourself a boost and enough energy while your body is fighting whatever it's fighting. Okay. Same is true of hamsters. So it's a very caloric dense food. And at that point, we're not super worried about fiber. We're just worried about keeping them alive and giving them enough energy to fight off whatever they're fighting off. And I do believe that herbivore care can do that. Okay. That's great to know. Yeah. I think I need to look again at the nutritional facts, but yeah, I was always confused about that when my vets would give me that. So thank you for that. As long as they're a good vet, otherwise I would take them up on it.
Well, and it's so hard, because I would say it can be, even if you see an exotic vet. I mean, I don't know how vets do it, and exotic vets in particular. I mean, the wide range of animals that they have to see and know about is sort of astonishing to me. Like, on the opposite, it's like you have doctors who specialize in eyes and, and the liver. And then we have vets who do surgery on all parts of animals, who work on birds and snakes and hamsters. And, this extremely wide variety of animals.
Absolutely.
So I think first of all, I don't know how anyone does that job, and I would love to talk to an exotic vet sometime. But also, I have had a variety of experience with different vets. I'm sure you have too. And sometimes I get in this kind of like, I get a little bit nervous, like just trusting what they say. And I think because I've had some experiences that made me kind of wonder, like, is this the best advice? I don't know. Like, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is very varied.
Yeah.
Vets as a rule, I mean, we think of doctors for humans. You have your GP, you have your specialists, and
Right.
it's one species they got to worry about, and they're not also, groomers and behaviorists and nutritionists and all of that at the same time, whereas vets have to be. And then you have to, in the case of exotics, add multiple species and just potential like classes of animals. It's wild.
Right? Yeah. Yes. It is very wild. And so I guess I want to go, oh shoot, did I lose my track? Oh man, I had this oh yeah. Okay. About the Oxbow. I had this question as you were talking, I was thinking like, have you, or to your knowledge, is there a difference in like what you were saying about Oxbow with Syrians versus dwarf hamsters? To my knowledge, like their diet is pretty similar, but they look very different. Mm-hmm. They're pretty different animals in many ways. Have you noticed anything different, or do you feel that there's any need to be different?
I'll be honest that my deficit is really like species specific nutrition because of the research I've done, being a dwarf hamster specific rescue. Like that's where my area of expertise is. But what I would say is that while they are different species of animals, they are like extremely genetically related with all of the same parts of their body. And I'm thinking specifically of the multi-chambered stomach, right?
Okay.
And so in the domesticated species, I wouldn't expect that large of a difference in nutritional needs that couldn't be covered by like an overage. So like you read like the nutrition labels and everything, and it has the minimum maximum. Those are formulated based on the needs of hamsters in general, and usually the golden hamster or Syrian hamsters, because that's what we have the most research on.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that answers my question, because that's exactly how I felt is it feels like most research is about Syrian hamsters. When people, even just like anecdotally, when people talk about hamsters, it's usually Syrian hamsters. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, nobody really, I mean, again, this is like very anecdotal and like my viewpoint, but I feel like very, very rarely are people talking about dwarf hamsters specifically, or even really aware of them at all. Right. It feels like they're very much an afterthought. Right. So that's very interesting to know that they're so similar. Yeah. In your experience, like reading research about hamsters, do you feel like there is a lot out there? Like if someone wanted to educate themselves, is there a lot of research on hamsters? Do you feel like there's sort of like a little bit, or like where are we kind of in that space?
It's a little of both. So hamsters are one of the most common laboratory models. So we do definitely have tons and tons of research using hamsters. For me, that's been great because I do a lot of food safety research, and that's what a lot of the trials are, and like the medicinal benefits of foods. So yes, if we're talking more about taxonomy, behavior, ecology of hamsters in the wild, most of that research was done in the 70s and 80s, and a lot of it even as far back as the 50s, when hamsters were really being studied. So it's out there, but there is a deficit of quality research of hamsters in the wild.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was sort of what I was thinking, and yeah, that kind of confirms how I was feeling, because I think in the question I was going to sort of lead to at some point was I would love you to talk more about dwarf hamsters living together. And I know that's like a really controversial topic. And some of the, like, I'm not promoting that people house their hamsters together, but that I also feel like when people take these like extreme stance where they're like hamsters are solitary animals, and, even though in the wild, sometimes they live in colonies, they definitely should be alone, in your house. And I feel like, well, do we really have enough research to say that for sure? Like, do we really know all of these things? And that's sort of where I feel like I've fallen, is like, maybe it is best practice to keep them separate, but is it just because we're in limited space? And you know what I mean? Like, like maybe they sort of are more like cats, where like cats sometimes can benefit a lot by having a companion animal, and sometimes they do better on their own. Right. And I mean, this is like coming from very like me thinking about it, not really knowing anything. So I'm curious on your more educated thoughts about dwarf hamsters and cohabitation.
No, I think you nailed it. level that most people will get to, which is don't keep dwarf hamsters together unless you really know what you're doing.
Right.
So that being said, there are benefits to dwarf hamsters being kept socially. We know this from research. We know this anecdotally, or at least I do, from my work with dwarf hamsters. So I have written a pseudo research article. It's my research. It's self-published. It's not in any journal or peer-reviewed other than by, my friends reading it. That looks at the different species of dwarf hamsters. So we know that Roborovskis tend to do best in female pairs. We know that Campbell's and winter white dwarf hamsters tend to do best in male pairs. And we... Oh, excuse me, I lost my train of thought there for a moment. We also know that the rule of thumb is family members that have never been separated. Yeah. If those things are not true, it's highly likely to not work, which can have deadly consequences. So,
right.
Not good. Yeah. I had been doing research into winter white dwarf hamsters, and they do come together for breeding purposes. They do rear the litter together, and it is common for the older babies to stay and care for their younger siblings. Oh. So there are familial bonds. We just don't know how deep these psychological bonds and versus physiological bonds are. We do know that when it comes to the fathers in this situation, that it is not due to a hormone shift. So when hamsters are neutered or castrated, they will still rear their young. Yeah, which is so interesting, because you would assume that there's some kind of hormonal change that happens that would cause them to be paternal. But no, it seems to be physiologically in their DNA to rear their young. Now, that's specific to raising their young, which has an evolutionary advantage, of course, and so that makes sense. Can we generalize that to say that they need to be kept together? Maybe, maybe not. We do know that when breeding pairs are separated in the winter white species, males tend to show symptoms of depression, which is increased appetite, sometimes decreased appetite, as you know, just as in humans, depression shows up in different ways. Decreased exercise and activity levels, and hormonal and neurotransmitter changes in the brain.
Wow, that's so heartbreaking.
It is. Those effects can be reversed with an SSRI or an antidepressant. So we know that what we are looking at is depression and anxiety, which is super interesting in a rodent model. And so I would never say that the benefits outweigh the risks for most people. But there are benefits. Anecdotally, I have seen that the hamsters that I've kept together, specifically male siblings, live much longer.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, I have a few boys that are pushing 3 years old.
Wow.
Which given their upbringing, which is like extreme incestuous situations, they are not the healthiest. So I think that that's significant. I hope that the work that I do, I can maybe with all the free time that I have, extrapolate that into some research and trials that can be helpful to the community to kind of prove this a little bit more as well in captivity.
Yeah. I mean, I think what would be such a cool place to get to is to have some sort of like comfortable place to be where we could say like, this is a situation where they should live together. You know what I mean? Have some sort of like rule of thumb that people could follow, or even like rules of thumb about how to set up a cage or what size cage they need. I think I've heard varying different things about how to keep hamsters bonded together. I've gotten rescue hamsters as in groups and pairs before, and I've not really been successful in keeping them as a group. I tried, and then I would get nervous because I'd see them sort of tussle a little bit. And then I was like, I don't know, is that like play fighting? Is it real fighting? And then I would eventually just be like, okay, I'm just going to separate them because it just made me too anxious.
Yeah, it's not worth the risk sometimes. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. It's like so hard. I don't think I know enough to like know what is normal, like what, or even know how to encourage them to live, like well together. I think the first time I had a pair of dwarf hamsters, I actually got through Tiny Tracks, right? I think I got them through,
Oh,
was it Sam, who was your partner?
yes.
Yeah. I think I met her like in a parking lot in Thousand Oaks. It was like the middle of COVID. So I couldn't, we couldn't like see each other's faces.
Yep.
So it was very brief.
Times.
But so I got these two dwarf hamsters, and I tried to keep them together, and I saw some info sheet from like the Ontario hamster group, and
Yes.
it was like, okay, start them in a small bin, like 300 square inches, give them like one of everything, so they have to like learn to share, and then like one hide, but it has two openings.
Mm-hmm.
And then I like watched them on the camera at night, and I kind of saw them like chasing each other around, and then I don't know. Then I moved them to a bigger bin. Maybe I think I like moved them too quickly or something. And then eventually I just separated them. And I think in the end, and again, like this is like, I don't know, did I interpret this right? But the one who I think was being bullied and was sort of a more aggressive hamster, like she would bite and stuff. After we separated her, she became more outgoing and like relaxed.
Yeah.
And then the one who I think was the dominant one, who was actually like very easy to handle. And I guess it makes sense kind of that the dominant one was easy to handle. She was sort of, just sort of like an easygoing hamster, whereas the one being bullied was the one who was on edge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think she sort of was depressed a little. That was my interpretation. She sort of like stopped coming out as much. And it always was hard for me to like get her to come out. She would just kind of hide a lot. And I sort of have to dig her out to get her to interact.
Yeah.
And I always felt bad. I was like, I think it was better for one, but worse for the other. And I always wonder, like, did I do them right? And then I think I recently, I had a similar situation recently with two Robos, and I reached out to you and you said like, oh, you should have two of things and have them interwoven in the enclosure, and make sure the enclosure is big enough so they each have space. So it was a very different like approach I think you take, and maybe that would have helped me. Yeah, I don't know. So I still feel sort of like, and maybe we don't know, but I feel
Right.
like I don't really have the answers. Like if I were to get two hamsters again that came to me together, I still am not really sure what I would do.
I think that you handled it perfectly. I mean, safety is the top thing. So if you you got to trust your instincts. If it doesn't look right, it's probably not right. And I mean, we don't know if she felt depressed, but even so,
Right.
That's not nearly as detrimental as what could happen.
Sure.
Being bullied.
Right. Yeah.
So I think you did great. I will say that probably not in this case, but sometimes people separate too early. If we're adopting hamsters out together, it's because they're siblings or mother-daughter or something like that. And they, just like in humans, they're going to have arguments. They're going to have little play fights. They're going to have some conversations with each other about resources, and there's going to be some hierarchy too. So my rule of thumb with fighting, so to speak, is less than 30 seconds and no injuries.
Okay.
Yeah. But you, again, have to trust your instincts there, because the alternative can be deadly. And
right.
That's where I come back to, it's always safest to just keep them single. And maybe there's going to be emotional consequences, but it's for everybody's best interest.
Right. Yeah. And I know that you house hamsters together currently, when you rescue them, and I mean, have you had issues, or how do you monitor? Like for me, I like, I have hamster cams, and I like watch the footage. I spend enormous amounts of time. I'm sure that is not possible with the number of hamsters that you have. So I'm curious how it is, like, how do you, I think in my head, I was sort of thinking, once I see that they're not sleeping in the same place, or they don't seem to like be around each other intentionally, I'm like, okay, it seems like it's not going well. I'm curious if there's like some markers that you can reference without having to watch hours of footage?
Yeah. So first of all, we set ourselves up for success, right? So we use the research that we have. Family members that have never been separated. So
Right.
I will only ever keep hamsters together that come together, obviously. And I know that males do best. So if I have enough cages, I will separate females and I will single them out.
Okay.
Because they just get so territorial. In between, like, it's a lot of monitoring and like during cage cleanings and health checks and things like that, to just look for signs of injury or little tufts of hair missing, things like that. And then also, obviously, when I'm working in the hamster space, I'm keeping an eye on how everybody is behaving. Things get missed. Hamsters end up with bite marks or scabs, and like that's just the nature of I'm one person and I have 200 animals. But I go back to, okay, well, they came from a situation where there were 60 hamsters kept in one bin. Like I'm doing the best that I can. So pet owners, of course, have the luxury of keeping a closer eye on their hamsters and monitoring for those things. And that's just where I try to provide guidance. The rule of thumb is abundance. So some people take that as like, oh, I got to have 2 of everything. That's cool. I have a big old bowl of food, like a trough almost, in their cage. So they never feel like, okay, I can't get to the food, or I can't run away if I get attacked or something like that. So that in those interior moments where maybe I miss a chase or a nibble or a squeak, they have a lot of escape routes to try to keep themselves safe.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And thank you for going into that more in depth. I think it's like funny. It's not, I mean, it's about, their safety and health, but people can get so worked up about this question, or even the idea that someone might house 2 dwarf hamsters together can be like really controversial. So
it's true.
So it's great to like hear some like the realities and just talk about it openly and sort of like, I mean, I think it's clear it doesn't really make sense for most people to ever do it. But I think there are times like when you are a rescuer that it makes sense. And and given, the situation they come from, it's a huge step up. And ideally, hopefully they'll get adopted out and live happily ever after lives. If you have a community of like, I'm assuming, do you have like more than 2 ever? Like, I'm assuming that you'll have a bunch of male dwarf hamsters maybe living in.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Do you ever like maybe there's 2 that are specifically bonded and you keep them together, or do you usually just adopt them out individually?
Oh, absolutely. I will adopt out pairs. I really don't go more than pairs.
Right.
Yeah, that's just bad news for the average person. And that's only to local homes, because I trust that they are going to keep an eye on those hamsters and let me know if something happens. And they do have the option of returning a hamster to me or coming to me for additional supplies so they can house and separate those hamsters safely.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's lovely. Oh, that's so nice.
That's my job.
Well, you do a good job with it. And while we're talking about your rescue, do you have any like goals for your rescue? I mean, it seems like you're doing amazing work and you've scaled so much in the last couple of years, but do you want to continue what you're doing, for the foreseeable future? Do you have like goals of having a bigger space, or maybe goals of having fewer hamsters and doing more retention? Like, do you have any sort of personal goals that you're trying to work towards?
That's a great question. Yes. So the goal number 1 is to get it out of my house.
That seems fair.
Yeah, I love them so much, but wow, it is a time suck. It is nice to be able to like check out of things, and not have to be constantly worrying or like, oh, I'm just going to go do this one more thing, which will turn into 10 things. So
yes,
that's thing number 1, but of course that takes funding and stable funding to pay rent. So yeah, and then for the hamsters, I would love to be able to improve our quality of care. So that looks like we need to reduce the problem in Los Angeles and enough so that we can take some of the burden off of rescues like mine,
Right.
so that I can upgrade those cages. So most of my cages are about 360 square inches, and that's only for one, maybe two hamsters at a time,
Okay.
which is better than most.
I think that's pretty good.
I
Yeah.
try.
For the number that you have, that's incredible.
Yeah, I do my best there, but it's not perfect. So the rest of the cages I use are modified Critter Nation cages, which provide 800 square inches of space, and those are for larger groups typically. And I would love to be able to upgrade to all Critter Nation cages or something similar, and be able to reduce the number of hamsters in those cages as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It is a big problem, is how to get those numbers down. And it feels like I don't know, maybe it's just me from an outside point of view, but it feels like the issues have almost gotten worse in LA with I don't know, maybe it's just perspective, but, yeah, I don't know what the solution is to that, and maybe, I mean, I think what would help is if big pet chains stopped selling hamsters. And I know there's been kind of talks about legislation on that. I don't know if that's the right answer, but it might help.
Amber's Chinchillas, she works with CalFed. Anyway, just other rescues.
Right.
They strongly believe that the answer could be improved welfare in the pet stores. If people can go into Petco and it is maybe harder or more expensive or something to obtain a hamster because now you have access to larger cages, you can see in the store the way that they are meant to be treated, and that they're treated with dignity and respect, rather than just a product, then maybe people will start to recognize that. So I strongly believe that it is a combination of increased animal welfare standards, but we also have to try to stop the bleeding a little bit of, hey, we can't be selling this high volume of animals.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That would be impactful. I think if you walked in and you saw really like how they should be housed and how they should be treated. My understanding is in Germany, that's how it is. And I haven't like gone to look at that, but I wonder if that would change the perspective. I do think it's helping that like, at least there's so many, like if you search hamster cage on Amazon, there's like so many more better options. I think it just like starts the conversation like, oh, it seems like 4 years ago, the option was Critter Trail. And now it's like hundreds of, various kind of like knockoffs from the bigger worlds from Night Angel. But it's
progress.
Right. Yeah. It's like, even though like some of them are only 300 square inches, like it's still at least like not a cage, it's still getting away from necessarily a cage and more of an aquarium type setup where you could have more bedding or, so I do feel like there's progress. I mean, in my experience, in my 4 years of hamstering, I feel like I've seen huge progress. Yeah. So I think that is hopeful. I keep thinking like, oh, it'd be cool if I could like fund this constant, like a shuttle that goes from LA and like deposits hamsters, because in this part of the country, there's not nearly, I mean, there are no hamsters in shelters maybe I see one or two occasionally, and typically it's like a Syrian hamster. I almost never see a dwarf hamster. It's just like not a problem. What'd you say?
Which is great news in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, totally. So, I mean, it's a great like quote unquote problem, but sometimes like when I've had, right now I'm totally full up on hamsters, but like a year ago I was like, oh, I want to take in a few more. And there were like no hamsters that needed rescuing. I was like, oh, okay, I'll just like wait. And then eventually, I had plenty that fell into my lap, but
it always happens.
It's true. And like once you put your name out there, then suddenly it's like, oh, I've got a hamster. I've got a hamster.
Absolutely.
Right. But yeah, I do think about this problem in LA because I see the posts and I see the, 30 hamsters on the red list. And I'm like, oh, I like, other than give money, like I wish that there was something I could do or something I could promote. And I don't know. Yeah, I don't have the answers, but
if you think of them, let me know, please, because we're all working on it here.
Yeah.
But, all of the support that we receive is appreciated tenfold. It's what keeps us going. Even just a comment of thank you. For, like we do this for the people as much as we do it for the animals.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's true. And it is nice. I do feel like that was like the double rose of like when I started getting into hamsters is it's like, oh, I like hamsters, but also there's this world of people who can be like really wonderful and great to connect with, and this like whole community that's been so enriching. And so I can see that how that could be so rewarding for you. And I'm glad that I will keep commenting and sharing. And that's good to know. I mean, I try to give whenever I can. And like, I try to like, I'm like, oh, this rescue or this rescue. And yeah, I can't, one day if I'm ever rich and famous, I will like, I'm giving it all away to hamsters.
See, I'm right there with you. But yeah, I mean, it's also frustrating because it's not any of our faults, Yeah. And so like the people that are donating are doing it out of the kindness of their heart, but they didn't create this problem. And so like, it's just, it's a cycle. So absolutely appreciated, but there's also never any pressure. Everything that any form of support is greatly, greatly appreciated.
Yeah. Well, good. That's great. And then while we're on that and how people can support you, you just started your own seed mix, and I'd love to kind of like hear about it and also like, why you think it's great. And I'm assuming and hopeful that this is like helping you fund your rescue. And so it's, if people are looking for a great seed mix, it's like you can both get food for your hamster and support rescuing hamsters. So I'm really excited for that. And I hope it's been successful for you so far. I know you've only been like a week in maybe. Yeah.
Thank you. It's been a slow rollout. So it's called Snow White's Enchanted Forage Mix because we love a theme. That name is chosen, though, because it's a forage mix. It's meant to provide enrichment and supplementation to the diet.
Okay.
But not specifically meant to be a standalone food.
Interesting.
It's my belief that no non-homogenized food can ever provide a balanced diet to an animal that has free will, which is just another way of saying that if I could eat from a buffet every single day, I would subsist on chocolate cake, and that's not good for my body. The same is true for hamsters. So I noticed that there are these beautiful mixes online on Etsy and other smaller shops. But A, they're very expensive, and B, they are purported to be a whole diet. I wanted to kind of sneak in there and do something in the middle. My mix is meant to provide an option for folks that want to support rescue, that aren't able to or don't want to maybe pay like luxury prices, and that are understanding of their hamster's nutritional needs. So, I still recommend feeding it with a block diet, but I think that it is a really awesome little forage mix, which is good for them psychologically as foraging animals in the wild.
Right. So are you thinking like someone typically it's recommended that you mix Missouri lab blocks with Higgins seed mix, right? In the United States, that's kind of like our best option. Is this like you still continue feeding them that, but maybe like every other day, give them a spoonful of your forage mix, or how would you kind of recommend using it?
It is it is nutritionally calculated to be a suitable replacement to any seed mix. So it can certainly replace the Higgins or the Bunny Nature. The thing it can't replace is the protein block, because that forces balanced nutrition and the vitamins and minerals, which are not added to my diet. That being said, I am working on, while I've done the calculations, I'm working on getting the AFCO label to prove that it is able to replace that product, which is something that no other gourmet mix online has managed to do yet.
So cool.
Yeah, it is my conviction that I want to provide what I say that I'm providing.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So the goal is to get it to the point where you wouldn't have to mix it with a lab block, that this could just be on its own. Like, because you do have mealworms in there, so I'm assuming that's a protein source.
Yes.
And lentils and all sorts of stuff.
Yes, I wouldn't say that's the goal, just because it's, again, we go back to the buffet analogy of like, hamsters are always going to pick out their favorite things. And I've had people tell me, they won't eat the black soldier fly larva or the mealworm things in that diet, or the tofu pieces or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, that's the protein. So that's not good. So I do still think that a block will be necessary, but my goal is to make it so that it can be a larger part of the diet by proving that it is nutritionally sound.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because sometimes I think in some groups you hear people kind of sort of, well, it is like this whole theme of like, we shouldn't be feeding our hamsters, lab blocks, and, this whole thing about like what's natural for hamsters and natural hamster theme and natural hamster foraging and all this stuff. I think it's, I agree that it's nice to mimic what they might do in the wild, and because that is linked to their happiness and enrichment and all that stuff. But I also think like saying, "Oh, it's unnatural to feed them lab blocks. We shouldn't feed them lab blocks." I'm like, well, it's not really natural that they live in a 75 quart tank in your house. Like,
right.
So like making all these decisions based on like what is natural or in the wild seems sort of moot to me, because I think the whole premise is that you have a hamster living in a box in your house. So why are we? It just seems like a strange way to make a decision.
That's a very good analogy. Yeah. And like, even looking specifically at the diet, none of us are harvesting the ingredients for our seed mixes in the wilds of Syria, which is what they would have access to. So like thinking about, and I have some great papers on this, the difference between wild wheat and domesticated wheat in terms of nutrition, in terms of starch content, in terms of fiber, is worlds apart. I mean, they're almost different species in and of themselves. Same with corn and just any domesticated veggies. So it's not 100% accurate to say that any diet is species appropriate, because it's just not. We have access to the ingredients that we have.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point to make. Yeah. And I feel like I've heard sort of the analogy, like a lab block, it's like you take your vitamins. I mean, I know lab block is also a protein source, but that like it serves a lot of purposes. And one of them is just sort of like ensuring some sort of nutritional well-roundingness, right? That it's kind of like a vitamin for your hamster.
Yes. That's a great way of putting it.
Okay. Oh, great. Yeah. Yeah. And to be honest, most of the time, I feel like most of my hamsters seem to like their lab blocks. I've never seen one not want to eat it. So, so it's funny to hear that argument. I'm like, I don't know. It seems like it's going pretty well.
Yeah, I would agree. And I do hear that once in a while, but my question is always, okay, well, how much seed mix are you offering them and how often are you replenishing it? Because I would pick out all my favorite things and ignore the vitamins, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. I guess sometimes I do struggle with that one, because I do have hamsters who like, there's always like one thing in the mix that they don't really like. And then I'm like, well, am I going to like wait until they eat that thing before I give them any more food? Like, do I force them to eat that? Like, some of my robos don't seem to eat any lentils really, or like, and sometimes I wonder if it's just like robo versus dwarf. Like I do notice like there's, differences in preferences there. Like the dwarf hamsters tend to like love the lab blocks more, and they tend to really like pea flakes and some of the legumes, whereas like the Robos seem to be more interested in like mealworms and like maybe some of the more like seeds. And then, of course, like there's so many idiosyncratic, like each hamster is totally different also within that. But like, what's your opinion on that? Like should I wait until they eat every last seed before I give them more? Or I kind of do like, my like rule of thumb is I'm like, okay, like I usually do about every other night, depending on the hamster, like Robos maybe every other night, or if I can see that they have some, like I scatter feed or I put it in like a digging area. Like if I see that it's all gone, then I'll give them more. It kind of like, I just sort of like go based on what feels right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the beauty of using it as a supplemental diet, right? You know that they have their nutrition needs met. And so it is okay, totally, to just let them enjoy life and enjoy the best parts of their mix. So no issues there as long as you're feeding with a suitable block. Right.
Okay. Great to know. Yeah. Yes. And I always make sure they have at least a few tucked away. I usually like put it in a hide or something, and then they sort of they find it and nibble it there. Or sometimes I specifically put it somewhere out in the open because I'm like curious where they're going to carry it to. It's like a fun game I play with myself.
I love that.
So funny. Yeah. So I think that's like all of my major questions for you. I'm curious if you have like anything you want to talk about or anything you want to say to the world. I mean, let's be real here. In the hamster world, few people, maybe this podcast will grow. I think I kind of started it on this, like, I don't know. I started it based on like, I wanted to hear you talk to someone about hamsters. And so I was like, okay, I guess I should do this. So I suppose a lot of my podcasting is very selfish. But I am curious if do you have anything that you'd like to share?
Well, the first thing that I'd like to say is that I think that you're doing wonderful things with your channel and your Instagram and your website. Like it is such a rich resource of information for all types of learners, which I think is, like that's an education person in me, like fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, we've had a lot of resources in the form of websites and everything, but like even just the thought to do a podcast, like that's brilliant.
Thanks.
To be able to take learning on the go, that's wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big podcast person. I just like love listening to podcasts. And I mean, I was always listening to Holly's podcast too. And and then I didn't do a podcast for a long time because I was like, well, Holly's already doing one. And then I thought like, okay, there's lots of hamsters. There's room for two podcasts.
Yes, there are. Yes, absolutely. There's room in this community for everyone.
Thank you. Yeah.
The other thing I did want to plug is I don't know if you're aware, but there is a movie, short film coming out about myself and Aaron as the California Hamster Association.
Right. I remember you posted about this maybe months ago, or it could have been a year ago. I don't remember. It was like a while ago, right?
Yeah, it was a couple months ago. We went up to San Francisco for the premiere.
Wow.
So it's called HamStars.
That's so fun.
Super cute.
Okay, I'm going to write it down.
It's a lighthearted little, I think it's 40 minutes, film about hamster shows and the hamster fancy. And the producers were kind enough to fly us to England for a little jaunt and to go see some of the British hamster shows.
So cool.
Yeah, it was such an incredible experience, and it's really taken place over, I think, really like the last probably 6 years in production, just like on and off. So I will be posting about that when that comes out pretty soon. I think it's they're in talks to get it onto streaming.
So cool. Do you know, or maybe you can't say yet, like where it might be streaming, or we should just stay tuned? I'm not
actually sure because I think the plan was to submit it to some festivals first before that. So don't know yet.
Okay. And did you guys like make this movie or someone else? How did that come about?
We were approached by the producers, Kristen Brakeman and Lindsay. Her last name is failing me, but I will get that to you. Who were like, they found out about hamster shows. And they asked, can we come check one out? And they just thought it was like this quirky little hobby. And they just wanted to make a little film about it. So it's
cool.
super fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, I'm so excited about that.
Me too. Thanks for the opportunity to bring that up. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I remember you posting about that, but it sort of had gotten out of my mind because then I was thinking about your seed mix and, all the other stuff. You have a lot of hamster things going on.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not like the forefront. Right. Yeah. I don't know. Do you ever feel challenged balancing all this stuff because you also have a job and I'm assuming a life
sometime in between.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that the work that I do is the balance. Being a therapist, especially with children, is extremely emotionally taxing.
Sure.
And so to be able to come home and still have that need met of I need to feel needed. I need to be a helper.
Yeah.
That's the rescue. And so it's nice to have that emotional break, but still be doing what I love.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, I'm so glad that they can be that for you. I think, yeah, that's so true. I do feel like I just got this new, well, she's not new, but new to me hamster who's one-eyed and very grumpy.
Oh, the best ones. I
know. I was so excited. I mean, I love friendly hamsters too. And it's always nice to have a hamster you can hold and snuggle with. But she is so funny and it's so fun to see her explore. And, I don't know what her previous situation was like, but it's hard to know with grumpy hamsters. Did they come this way or did they have some sort of traumatic event?
Right.
But it's just so nice to see her how finding her way around with her one eye and I don't know, it's just very rewarding and and I just it's so nice to be able to do that. I feel like that is the nice thing. I think, have you ever seen this movie Downsizing? I don't know if you've...
Yes, I have.
Okay. So I think about this in regards to hamsters all the time is it's I probably can't, provide a whole life for a person, but I can provide a whole life for a hamster in need. And so it's kind of this it's a way to feel that, it's oh, this hamster who needs something they're small. And so you can do so much for them with way less, than so I think there's some feeling of, and I think it kind of started the economy was hard. I was kind of struggling living in LA and it felt I might have trouble living my dream life, but I can give a hamster the world. Do you know what I mean? And if you haven't seen Downsizing, it's basically the idea that if you shrunk yourself as a person, then you can meet all your needs with a fraction of the cost, right. And live in a tiny house in a tiny world. So I guess I think about that with hamsters in the same way.
That is a really beautiful and interesting analogy. I love that.
Very strange.
But also how wonderful that because of how simple their needs are, we can provide such a enriched life for them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you can feel so so rewarded and fulfilled by that. That being said, I give money to charities and other things for human beings as well. But it is just sometimes when you look at the world's problems and I can get very defeated feeling how can I ever make an impact on this? I can give $10 a month or something, but for a hamster, that's a life. That's a whole,
absolutely.
A whole thing. So it's really nice. So I think unless is there any other things, any goals for, the hamster community in the US that you'd like to see or,
I think the main goal is to have more people like you being a part of it.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you.
Really appreciate the work that you're doing. Like I said, we can work in parallel to each other and, to provide guidance to people at different steps in their hamster journey. And like, I love all of the wonderful people that I get to work with, including yourself.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, me too. And I think I love that you said that. And it's just sort of like, to me, the thing that I kind of like say a lot is like, everybody is on different places in their hamster care journey and their life. And right. And there can be this like shame side of hamstering where like people kind of like rip each other apart, like, oh, like your care is horrible, like your hamster's in a 100 quart bin, they should be in a 200 quart bin. And I guess I feel like, you know what, let's take a breath. Like, everybody is on a journey. The first time, that like it takes time. I remember like when I first realized that a critter trail wasn't enough, I think I bought like 3 cages before I got to a bin cage. And it just takes a while to like sink it in and like realize what hamsters need and really understand it. And I don't think it's like a binary thing that like either you're a good hamster caretaker or a bad one. I think that you just, like you're on a journey and everybody's on it. And
these numbers are always changing, and ultimately they're so arbitrary, just plucked from a human brain. And they don't represent like the light switch that is going to make your hamster happy or not.
Yes.
So just striving to do better in general is the key.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with me. I feel like it took me like a long time to find the time, and but it was like well worth the effort. Thank you for your patience. And I can't wait to see what you do. And I'm next time I run out of seed mix, I will be a future customer of yours. I'm excited to try your seed mix.
And it all goes back to the hamsters. So I'm really proud to be able to offer that.
Oh, that is so great. Awesome. Well, best of luck. And can't wait to see the movie. So make sure once you post about it, I will make sure I share it.
Thank you. And thank you for having me tonight. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Yeah. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your night. I will talk to you soon.
You take care.
You too. Bye, Tony. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed my chat with Tony from Snow White's Rescue Cottage as much as I did. I learned so much. I still feel like I have a million questions I want to ask her. So I'm definitely going to have her back. If you have anything you'd love to ask her or you want us to cover on the podcast, feel free to reach out to me. I'm at rachelgothamsters@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment down below. And I hope to see you in our next episode. Thank you.